All right, so we're going to talk about two-dimensional arrays today, and then see kind of where we get. So, a two-dimensional array, way to think of it is an array of arrays. We could have three-dimensional, four-dimensional, as many dimensions as we want. But really, what we're talking about is the ability to have a one-dimensional array, which is the list, and then this is an array, an array, an array, and we grab them all together. We get a two-dimensional array. And the way that they're going to be declared, we have int and then our brackets. This signifies a two-dimensional array. This is our number of rows, and this is our number of columns. So you can think of 12 rows, and each of those would have 50 entries in them. The way you would access them, this would be your fourth row and then your seventh column, the same way that we had before where we start counting at 0 as we move forward with it. They're going to hold the same data type, so you're going to have an array of ints or strings or doubles or whatever you have. You need to think about kind of what each piece is going to hold. So if I just call one value, this is like a row. This would be the sixth row, and this is going to give me an array back. If I call the sixth row and then the 13th item, I would then get back an actual value, whatever was stored up there. So you can see as we're looking at these, we're going to always think about them. If we keep track of rows and columns, it won't be too tricky. This would be a two-dimensional array. I can say I have 1, 2, 3 rows, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. And so if I was trying to initialize this and make it work, it would look like this. So I'd have my two-dimensional array. It would store ints, and it'd be 3 and 4. So I'd have 3 rows, 4 columns. Each of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, is going to stand for a row. 5, 6, 7, 8 is going to be another row, and then 9, 10, 11, 12 is our last row. If we wanted to loop through this, we again are going to go through every row, and for each row we go through each item in the column. And so what we're going to see is we're going to have a loop within a loop. I have my outer loop, which is my rows, and my inner loop, which is in my columns, and then I'm going to access each row, so it would be the 0th row, and then I would go 0, 1, 2, 3 column to get all this back. Okay? And then this would be a way that you could actually set values. So you can, just like a normal array, you can set a value, you can modify a value, it's going to work the same way. The only really tricky part is traversing through them. And as you're doing that, you want to just make sure that you're keeping track of your rows and your columns the correct way. All right. If we're looking at for our number of rows, if we take that outer, the array.length, that is, in this case, 1, 2, 3, that's your number of rows. If we take the 0th element, just this, and we take our length, that's going to be the number of columns. So that's another way to kind of keep track of where your values are as you're going through this. Okay, so you're going to start working on the lab, and the lab is going to deal directly with two-dimensional arrays. So when you go to ahscs.com, you're going to find your two-dimensional array here. And then the first one, you're just going to set up you're going to set up the driver and the class. And what you're going to do is you're going to, for any two-dimensional array you create, you want to write a method that's going to get the average, and it's going to return a double. So it's going to have to loop through everything in the two-dimensional array, and it's have to store a sum and then divide by the number of entries. So if you take your rows times your columns, you're going to get your number of entries. You're going to get a second one that's going to get the sum of a column, and it's going to return that as an array. So you need to think about how that's going to be initialized, of how you're going to get this array to be the right size. Again, it should work for any set array, but you can hard code in an array to get it to look at. This is going to give you back a two-dimensional array that's going to square everything in it. So you can be passed a value, and from that, you're then going to make another array of the same size and square everything. I highly recommend that you don't modify the array that you're in. So you want to return another array that's the changed values from your first one. So those are the first three, and that'll probably take you through the first day. The second problem deals with something called a magic square, and you can use some of the things that you found up here to see how this works. So a magic square is going to be a square which the sum of every row, column, and diagonal is the same. And so you have down here a class called square that's going to have a two-dimensional array as its instance variable. And you can change that if you want to not be the same as a class, and that's maybe not the best design choice. And then you're going to have something that sums the row, that sum a column, and sum the main diagonal, and then sum the other diagonal. And you're going to be able to, from there, figure out what if they're all the same number, then it's going to be magic. So this part is going to have to use the methods that you have above to make it work. This is just a setter. This gives you a print statement. And then down here, you're going to have a tester. So this has some hard-coded magic squares. The first 3 should be magic, so you should get a true value when you run them. This one should be false as you go through it. It's got some print statements. And if you want to test some more, there are more magic squares down here. So make sure, sorry, the first 3 are magic, the rest are non-magic. And finally, you have your submission form. So I think your emphasis for today should be on really getting through these first couple, where again, you're going to set up your array and go through it. You can use some of the hard-coded values as you want to go through it. So an easy way to make a two-dimensional array is, if you're looking here, is to have your use your initializer list. So just like this, to set it. If you don't do that, just at this point after your 3 and 4, if it's declared that way, it's going to be all zeros. So you want to make sure that you have something that you can work with as you're going forward with it. So again, what your problems will look like when you run this. So bring your code over if you get to the magic squares. When you run the square tester and run the main, you should see that you have these values here. So you would have this one. This should become true. This should become true. True, and then this should stay false, but as it's figured out if the magic square is actually magic. All right, good luck.